The highest honor awarded by the South Carolina Athletic Trainers Association is the Fred W. Hoover Award of Excellence. This award honors members that have given unselfishly to the association and its membership for many years.
Hi everyone, my name is Leona Keller and I'm here with Kevin Ennis, who is a Hoover Award winner. We are going to do a short interview with him. So the first question that I have for you is, where did you go to school? What is your college degree? And what is your field of study?
I did my undergraduate work at East Tennessee State University. I had a bachelor's degree in physical education, biology with an emphasis in athletic training. My graduate program was at Austin Peay State University in Clarksville, Tennessee, and that was a master's of arts in education, in health education with a minor in administration and supervision.
Okay, you have a lot of degrees. How did your career path lead you to South Carolina?
I attended a student trainer camp put on by Kramer at Clemson University when I was in junior high school. And I just fell in love with South Carolina. And my goal from the time I was in junior high school was I wanted to be the head athletic trainer at a large high school in South Carolina. So after I finished my master's program, I had applied for a job and I was hired at Northwestern High School up in Rock Hill, South Carolina, which at the time was the 16th largest school in the state. I don't know where it ranks today.
Okay. So who influenced you during the early days of your career?
Well, getting started, Fred Hoover at Clemson introduced me to athletic training at those first student trainer clinics. And I just fell in love. It was what I wanted to do. It was who I was. And then as I went on through school, my undergraduate head athletic trainer, Jerry Robertson, became a very strong mentor and influencer for me. And he's the gentleman that made me passionate about athletic training. And then in my master's degree, Chuck Kimmel, who later became president of the NATA, got me very interested in the association side of athletic training. And those are the three big influencers while I was in school. Since that time, since I arrived in South Carolina back in 1985, I don't know why, but Fred Hoover and Andy Clausen took me under their wings and have kind of brought me along. And I've just been very fortunate to have men like that be on my side and be a sounding board and a mentor for me.
Most definitely. Thank you for speaking a little bit about those mentors. So what were the hot topics in athletic training during your early years?
I can remember medial collateral ligament repair surgery, which I don't think anybody does anymore. And the other hot topic was anterior cruciate ligament repair. And at that time, the rehab protocol was 52 weeks of rehab after the surgery. And I remember working with people for a solid year to rehab them to get them back to play. We've come a long way.
We certainly have. So the next question is, how did the coaching fraternity view or accept athletic trainers during your early years? Or what battles have you had to endure?
Depending on where you worked, many athletic trainers worked with coaches, not for coaches, and it depended on the situation. I've worked in all settings and situations, and I've worked with coaches, and some of the coaches were my supervisor as an athletic director or something like that, and typically don't have problems. They realize that the athletic trainer's there to try to get their athletes back on the field as soon as possible. I have had a couple of instances where I've butted heads with a coach over an athlete that he wanted to put back into play and the athlete wasn't ready, or I hadn't been able to complete an evaluation to determine if he was ready to return.
All right. Would you be willing to tell us in what ways has athletic training kind of evolved over the years while you were practicing?
Wow. Well, from a
It could be
52
big
week
takeaways.
from a 52-week rehab for ACL repair to what it is today is quite an evolution. That's one big one. And the education, it's amazing. I look at today's educational programs and they are so much more encompassing. I know when I got into the business world of athletic training, I had no education in business. I learned it through the School of Hard Knocks. Well, today, in the graduate programs, you're teaching billing and business information, and it's just wonderful. Not to mention the skills that are being taught now, airways, suturing. You know, when I went through, you wouldn't dare think about doing suturing or, it was all Steri-strips and ship them to be stitched. Or an airway. No way would we attempt an airway at that time. But today, it's just part of the skill set for the new athletic trainer coming into the profession.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit. Could you tell us about who were the representatives and senators involved with getting the first legislation in place? And has the statute changed since it was first enacted?
Well, yes, the statute has definitely changed since it was first enacted in 1984. Senator J.M. Wallace, I believe it was the senator who sponsored the first bill. And he was the only sponsor and very instrumental in getting that law passed for athletic trainers in South Carolina. Since that time, there have been a few amendments to it, with the last one occurring and being signed into law in 2019. And Representatives Steve Moss, Dennis Moss, Shannon Erickson, and Wes Cox were the big sponsors for that amendment to the bill in 2019.
Thank you. Could you explain to us what Regulation 6196 is?
Absolutely. First, let me go back to the statute for just a moment.
Okay.
The changes in the statute that we saw are basically wording changes and housekeeping changes to keep the document more current. So, for example, one of the changes that we made as a housekeeping change was that the Board of Certification was the Board of Certification, Inc., not the NATA Board of Certification.
Okay.
So that was a change that occurred. Some things like that, some language like that. Also, one of the more important changes recently in the 2019 bill is that it allows for our regulating body, South Carolina DHEC, to impose monetary penalties for practicing outside the law and the regulation. The regulation is a document that tells us how the law is to be enforced and opens up the law a little bit in terms of an explanation of the law itself. So, for example, it defines who the members of the DHEC South Carolina Athletic Trainers Advisory Committee are, who makes up that committee. It outlines the standards of conduct now. It outlines, and this is just a change that just occurred in May of this year, the updated revision to the regulation, that the standards of conducts are in there, patient records are in there, an area that talks about patient records. Standards of conduct for the first time are included in the new regulation. So it's basically the document that tells us how the law is to be enforced and regulated.
Thank you. So can you explain how have you been involved in SCADA?
I have been on numerous committees from the high school student workshop. I was president of the association back in the early 1990s. I worked on the third party reimbursement committee. I'm now currently on the history committee, COPA. And I just, wherever anyone needs my help, I'll jump in and help them if they have questions or thoughts or something that they want to run by me.
Okay, and can you explain a little bit why you think it's so important to be working with SCADA?
Your association is what propels the profession forward within your state. And it's very near and dear to my heart that I want athletic training in South Carolina to be the best it can be for our athletes and for the professionals that are performing the duties of an athletic trainer. And the only way to do that is to make the association stronger by working in it, getting involved, doing the things that need to get done for the association. For example, until just recently, we didn't really have we didn't have anything as far as a written document or anything about the history. Well, the history committee in the last couple of years, we have put together a book, if you will, a document that basically outlines athletic training in South Carolina and the South Carolina Athletic Trainers Association, how it came about, and how it has grown and changed over the years. And we've compiled quite a list. We have a database now of all athletic trainers in South Carolina that we can ever think of from the 1930s forward. We have NATA awards. We've got Shrine Bowl trainers listed. We've got SCADA awards. We've got the past executive committees where we met. We've got a packet of documents of almost all of the meeting agendas since 1985 or 6. I think we're missing like 2 or 3.
That's impressive.
So it's really cool to look back and see in 1985, we were paying $20 dues a year to be in the association. And the hotel rooms were like $40 a night to stay, to go to the meetings. We had our meetings at first in hotels. We would meet in somebody's room. Somebody would get a large room, a suite, and there'd be 15, 20, 25 people, and we'd all just gather in there and talk, and that was our meeting. It kind of became formalized in 1985, and we adopted a executive committee, and we actually elected them, and we had bylaws, and we were off and running.
Great, thank you. Can you tell us what the SCDHEC Athletic Trainers Advisory Committee is?
It's a committee that's appointed by the board of directors of DHEC, and it is an advisory committee to DHEC on athletic trainers in South Carolina. So we work hard to help athletic trainers in South Carolina and the profession to keep it growing and to keep it strong. We offer DHEC suggestions such as we have asked them to sponsor the SCATA meeting financially and provide some grant monies for the last, I don't know, several years, 6, 8 years, I guess. We also are heavily involved when there are statute and regulation changes. DHEC wants to know our opinions and our thoughts on statute and regulations. So we designed those documents, the regulation and the statute ourselves over the years. So we're an advisory committee to DHEC. DHEC regulates us. DHEC has paid staff that they have inspectors that can come out and go to a field site and find out if Leona really has her certification and check that versus DHEC. And if you're not certified, they can institute, legal proceedings against you.
Okay, great. So kind of going off of that a little bit, what do you envision as the next steps in the growth of athletic training in the state of South Carolina?
Well, our next big step is to change the word certification to licensure, and to bring it more in line with the rest of the United States. There are currently, I believe, 4 states that do not have licensure for athletic trainers. South Carolina and New York have certification. Hawaii has regulation or registration, and California has no regulation of athletic trainers. They are working on it, but they don't have anything yet.
And could you just explain, I was just thinking about this, could you just kind of explain for anyone who might be watching why it's important for that language to change, what the significance of that is?
In some circles, if you really dig down into it, certification, licensure, registration through a governmental agency all means the same thing. But to employers and to other professions, licensure seems to hold a higher ranking. So licensure is thought of as a better credential than certification, than registration or what's the other one?
Was it not registration?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, registration. So registration, certification, and licensure. So, and in some like OSHA, government agencies like OSHA says in their verbiage, they write that only licensed personnel can perform certain skills.
Okay.
However, if you dig into that, OSHA says that license means license, registration, or certification by a governmental body. So you have to kind of look at that and see that. But in general, licensure means more for athletic training in the future, just having that word there as opposed to certification. There's one other distinguishing factor. When you look and you dig into this stuff, typically volunteer associations, for example, like the NATA or the BOC that you voluntarily join, offer certifications. Typically, government bodies offer licensure. Now, that didn't happen in South Carolina because at the time of the original statute, there was a sunset clause going on in the legislature, and there were going to be no new licensure boards developed, period. That's because of money. They didn't want to create more boards, cost the state more money, so they decided we were going to be certified. And at the same time, typically most professions were housed in LLR, labor licensing and regulation. Well, for some reason, they didn't put us there. They put us in DHEC. We were originally in the department with waste management. So I'm not quite sure how they figured that one out, but one of the first battles that we had was to get out of the waste management division, and we got moved over to EMS. Well, that put us more in line with a like profession.
Mm-hmm.
And since that time, we are now, it's changed from EMS to, well, and then they've got other divisions. We are now in the division of health care services and professionals, I believe is the newest term. And that just happened. Well, actually it's happening now.
Okay.
The change is taking place right now.
Thank you for explaining that.
You're welcome.
So the last question that I have for you is, what advice would you give to today's young professionals?
Do your job. Do what it takes to do your job well. Get involved in your association. Personally, I work at the local level, at the state level. I've done stuff in the district. I've done stuff nationally for the Board of Certification and things. But my true passion is working for the state of South Carolina, or our association, the South Carolina Athletic Trainers Association. That's really, to me, that's local. That really affects me on a day-to-day basis. And I really enjoy that, and I enjoy the people. And our state meeting many times has more participants than does the district meeting these days. And I just think it's going that route. I think that the states are going to be the big body, and then you've got the district, and then of course you've got the national, and that gives us a little bit more power across the nation with legislation and some other things. We can team up with the PTs and the OTs and the various other professions that are like-minded to make positive changes for the health of our physically active population in the U.S.
All right. Do you have anything else you would like to add before we end this interview?
Just want to thank you and Dr. Hand and the University of South Carolina, that group, your group of colleagues there and students and peers that are being kind enough to do these interviews and allow them to be part of the association history.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time, Kevin.
Thank you.